My love for Jumbo Machinders is so great, you know, and I know in the initial part of the conversation I was talking about it sort of from a dollars and cents point of view, but aesthetically I love them. I think walking into a room of Jumbo Machinders is a great room to walk into, and I like making my own. And I've made my own for a long time by hand, you know, sculpting in my garage and with wood and Magic Sculpt and Sculpey and molds and casting in plastic. But now I've really gotten into 3D printing. And I love making Jumbo Machinders of characters that I've never seen in this form, or probably would never be in this form. And that's an exciting challenge for me, but it is still, at the end of the day, fan art. Creativity is a giant part of my identity. A great goal in life is trying to be a creative polymath and just, you know, going from one thing to another. Show business is a crazy thing, and, you know, this is not new information, but it can be very frustrating dealing with gatekeepers and like rejection. At the end of the day, I've really tried to focus more on do-it-yourself. I came out here to be a comedian. You know, I won this college contest when I was at the University of Michigan. It was called the funniest college student in America. I have written screenplays. I sold some screenplays. I had one that John Woo was going to produce, and Michelle Yeoh was attached to be in it, and she was excited to be in it, and that just kind of fell apart. And that's completely normal, but you feel kind of powerless. So I do sort of embrace creativity, and so the two things that I'm trying to do, and I'm going to kind of jump ahead here a little bit. There's two sort of movements going on right now, and my big idea, you know, was to combine these two things together. And one is the indie comic movement. Like, indie comic books are really a thing right now, and then on the other hand, and something that has been talked about a lot on this channel, is designer vinyl. Designer Con is only getting bigger, you know, it's just moving to Las Vegas, and there's a really wonderful explosion of designer vinyl toys. And it's wonderfully diverse too. And I'm starting to see some really cool old school robot designer vinyl stuff, which I can really get behind. And so that's cool, but you go to Designer Con and you see all of these great toys, and they are great designs and they're cool figures, but they're not character toys. There's no sort of story going behind them. And you go to Artist Alley or Indie Island, there are these people making these great comic books, and, you know, they've got their pitch down and like, hey, get this comic book because they want to get attention for their property, and get to a place where it's a thing and you're making merchandise from it. So my big idea, however it turns out, was to make my own indie comic book all by myself. It's called Jumbo Titan X and the Great Robot Arms Race. And I'm just having so much fun doing it. I really don't want to be a person who's all talk, especially in Los Angeles. You just deal with that all the time. People who are just, oh yeah, I'm doing this, this, and this. And I've got 3 issues of my comic book done. I'm working on issue 4, and I've got a vinyl toy. The molds are back from Asia. The parts are being cast in Colorado. They're sent to me. I'm painting them now. And this is gonna happen. It's 100% all me. And I don't mind at all being my own sweatshop. Metaphorically, we're all a stove. Each one of us is a stove. And we're a very thin stove that's got exactly 2 burners on it. It's got a front burner and a back burner. And the front burner is the thing that makes us money. That's our job. And the back burner is the thing that gives us joy. And, you know, I don't like the term side hustle because it implies that whatever you're doing on the side, you're doing it for the point of money. And that's a recipe for misery. If your front burner's for money and your back burner's for money and you're just scrambling all the time. And putting Jumbo Titan X on my back burner as the thing I'm doing I'm just so proud of it, and it makes me so happy, and it makes me so fulfilled. My big idea is I believe in promotional synergy, and I like the idea of the toy promoting the comic, and the comic promoting the toy, and it feels like I have my own IP. You know, I'm obviously a huge fan of super robots, and I just feel so honored to be part of its grand legacy. I'm really in a good place right now. In my 3D printing, you know, I do all the modeling myself of my own Jumbo Machinders, and I like to select characters that are interesting to me aesthetically. Osamu Tezuka is the god of manga. He created Atom, you know, Astro Boy, Phoenix, just so many things. He is really the forerunner of robot design in the 60s, him and Mitsutaro Yokoyama. So there was this episode of Astro Boy, the manga, called The Space Snow Leopard. And it was sort of sucking energy out, and it couldn't be defeated because it was basically a colony. And then towards the end of it, this giant robot shows up, and the tactics of the Space Snow Leopard don't work on it. And that's because it is also a colony. Astro Boy has taken a number of Earth's robots and combined them all into one in this beautiful amalgamation of like little heads and robotic details and inefficient jets on the legs. You look at it and only Osamu Tezuka could have designed it. It's just so indicative of his style. So I'm really a giant fan of Tezuka's design of that robot, which only showed up in, you know, a scant number of pages. But I was really happy to make that. Mitsutaro Yokoyama did the manga of Giant Robo and Gigantor, you know, Tetsujin 28. And the manga of Giant Robo was quite different than the live-action TV show, you know, which was translated into English and shown here. And there have been some toys that are kind of like the manga design. There's a tin toy, I think Billiken did it, where they did the live action thing and then they did the manga version, but they just kind of changed the coloring. So I really wanted to do one that had the proportions of the manga version of Giant Robo. And I had hand sculpted a version of the live action one in like 1994, and that's still in storage somewhere, but it would be nice to get it out and display it with it. Getter Robo G has some of the most exciting villain robots, design-wise, for me. There were just these demons with all these horns, and some of the enemy robots had hair, and I just loved them. And in the TV series, the Hyaki Empire, which was called the Pandemonium Empire on Star Avengers when they translated it into English, when they were sort of running low on robots, I want you to take these 5 robots and combine them into one all-powerful robot. And the way that it was put together and it would combine was just so unholy. It was so bizarre, and it was its own look. I've never seen anything like it. And Getter Robo G wound up fighting it for the final 3 episodes of Getter Robo G, like 90 minutes of dealing with this thing as they take out smaller and smaller pieces of it. And it's just stunning to me. The main weapon of Getter Robo G was called the Shine Spark, which became Starshine in the translation. And it would like illuminate, and then it would sort of do this kamikaze flight pattern into its enemy, and it would pull away, and the energy beam would descend onto its enemy and blow it up. But you could only use it once, and because it would take up so much power. And they tried it on this, and they didn't realize it, but the Gatai Hyaki mecha split apart. So they thought they blew it up, and then it's at the bottom of the ocean, and you see it reassembling. And as a kid, I just thought that was the coolest thing. It's such a ornate and complicated and bizarre and obscure. Like, that's the thing with enemy robots. They only appear in 1 or 2 episodes. This appeared in 3, but I was really completely in love with the design. So I wanted to make it, and I did. It was a challenge to paint it because it's so many different colors. It's haunted me for a long time. I was thinking about making it since the 90s, and finally I 3D printed it and I made it. Takara was a competitor of Popey, and Takara made Microman, and they ultimately made Diaclone, which would become the Transformers, Henshin Cyborg, big toy company. So they had a line called Magnemo, which had magnetic joints. So there were two sizes. There was Magnemo 8 and Magnemo 11. And that was the size in millimeters for the diameter of the steel ball that would be used and go into the magnetic component. So they made Magnemo versions of Jeeg, of Baratak, Godam, and one of Gakeen. And Gakeen was my favorite design. It's from 1976. You know, Jeeg was more popular. Jeeg was a Go Nagai character. Gakeen had these really long legs. And there's just some beautiful toys of Gakeen, and they're so hard to find. And there's like this die-cast one, which is really heavy. So I had thought about doing a Magnemo Jumbo Machinder Gakeen. So what that meant is I had to find 2-inch steel balls with like a female end for screws, and then I had to find the screws, and then I had to find super powerful magnets. It was a lot of engineering involved, and putting it together, like it fell apart because it was so heavy, but I did it. And I made a Jumbo Machinder Magnemo 48, because they're 48 millimeters across, Gakeen. It works. I wanted to have it embrace the 70s gimmick aesthetic, and I drilled a hole in the chest. And then I got a spinner to put in the chest, because when you're talking about 70s toys, a lot of them had these like flying saucer spinners that were like spinner guns. And that was not an easy decision for me, but I think it was absolutely the right one, and it totally captures the 70s toy aesthetic that I love so much. Ken Ishikawa unfortunately died in 2006, and one of the Getter Robo G mangas that I loved so much was called The Challenge of the Devil King. And it's about like an old schoolmate of one of the pilots of Getter Robo G is back, and he's sort of leading this underground movement, but he's really working for the Hyaki Empire, and they're assembling this robot called the Devil King. And it's not unlike the Colony robot in that it's this whole bunch of little robots coming together to form this really evil thing, and there's like a face. He becomes the face and the horn. It was too ornate to put in the anime. Again, same thing comes up, but it was just gorgeous. And there's this double page spread in the manga of him stomping on Getter Dragon. And that was the page that always stood out to me in the manga. I just loved it so much. And Ken Ishikawa, incredible mech designer. I believe he's the guy who came up with Garada K7. You know, he was designing a lot of the Kakaiju for Mazinger Z. There was an auction, and that page came up, the double page spread of the Devil King stomping on Getter Robo G, and I won it, and for a very reasonable price, and the exchange rate was good, and I was shocked. And I'm shocked that I still have it. So I wanted to make a Jumbo Machinder of it, but I wanted to do it in the style of the villains. And so it's slightly smaller, it's not 60 centimeters, and the head is detachable. And like there's a Jumbo Machinder villain, Rockron Q9, and the heads shoot out, and it's got this unique launching gimmick where you pull it back. So I'm gonna try and replicate that cosmetically in the Devil King Jumbo Machinder, and I'm really thrilled to have it next to the original page, which was so good. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is Pluto. It's criminal to me that the Pluto anime was released on Netflix last October, and I really haven't run into a lot of people that watched it. It is a complete masterpiece. So Osamu Tezuka, you know, created Astro Boy in the 60s, and one of the most famous manga stories and one of the most famous episodes from the TV series was called The Greatest Robot on Earth. And it's by this Arabian prince who wants to have the most powerful robot, and he has Pluto built for him, which is this giant black robot with really long horns. And it was a 2-part episode. The goal of Pluto is to destroy the 7 other greatest robots on Earth, so he will be number 1. And Astro Boy is one of those 7 robots. So it was a big deal in Japan. And when I saw the episodes, I was watching a bunch of Astro Boy episodes in like 1989. That's the one that stood out. The great manga artist Naoki Urasawa, who did 20th Century Boys and Monsters and Yuara, and he has a great video interview series called Manben. It's Naoki Urasawa interviewing old and new great manga artists talking about the artistry of manga. Definitely check it out. He wound up remaking Pluto as a manga, and it is a complete and utter masterpiece. And he turned this 2-part kids story into this gritty, noir, geopolitical murder mystery. And it's like 1,700 pages long. Pluto doesn't show up for like 1,100 pages. So, I don't know, 2017, it was announced that it was going to be turned into an anime. And Urasawa was such a control freak, he really had to make sure that it was done well. So it was released on Netflix this past October to not much fanfare. I mean, everyone who sees it is like, wow, this is a masterpiece, I love it, but it's not getting the same amount of attention that I think it should. So I decided to make a Jumbo Machinder of Naoki Urasawa's redesign of Pluto, which I think is beautiful and scary. Even though we don't see it much in the manga or the anime, it does show up ultimately. It's really cool to have a Jumbo Machinder Pluto on my shelf, so I'm really happy about that. And the thing about making these, just talking about toy aesthetics in general, the aesthetics of a toy shelf in general, that's what you're thinking about. I want this thing because it looks cool and it'll look cool on my shelf, but you also got to think about how is it going to look next to other toys? And I think that's part of the appeal of the Jumbo Machinders, because if you look at the rise of more detailed action figures in the 90s, you're dealing with McFarlane and you're dealing with wonderful, wonderful sculpting jobs. It's like if you walk into a museum filled with Hellenistic sculpture, which is, not Greek, the Kuro statue, which is really static and rigid. The more dynamic something is posed, the more it kind of needs to be viewed on its own, because if you're dealing with a shelf full of heavily dynamically posed figures, it kind of becomes this sea of detail that you get lost in. And I do have a bunch more than just these that I've made, some of that I sculpted by hand. I was talking to a gallery in Burbank. It would be nice to have an exhibit of a lot of these with long captions, beneath each piece, to sort of go through the history of super robots as I see them. Evil Giant Robots for Miranda was a project that I started in 2011 for my daughter. I've been taken by the idea of a theme sketchbook. The idea is that you have a sketchbook and every page is of a theme, but each page is drawn by a different artist. I heard of one of Creature from the Black Lagoon, and every page was Creature from the Black Lagoon, but it was done by a different artist. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And what I like about it is I like the scope of it, and I like the investment of time in it. Because a lot of super rich people who just buy everything up and all of a sudden they've amassed a big collection. I like things that take time. So I came up with the theme with my daughter of evil giant robots. And wow, what a shock if you watch the rest of this interview. So the idea was that I draw the first page, a different artist does every following page, and when there's one page left, she would draw the last page, and then the book would be hers. And it was so much fun, and I got so addicted to it that one sketchbook turned into two turned into three turned into four turned into five. And it has been such a wild adventure. These sketchbooks have gone all over the globe. One was lost in Italy for 10 years. One was lost by Adam Kubert for a year. He moved and he was going to do one, and it was in his studio and he couldn't find it. And did find it and I got it back. And there's no financial gain in this. This is just something for my daughter. Like, the resale ability of it is pretty low as far as I can tell, even though I've commissioned a lot of people to do something in it. It is purely for the adventure of it. And there's a thing of a study that shows that when you're taking notes by hand versus taking notes on a computer, that you remember it better. There's more sort of muscle memory involved. And there's something about artwork that I think is even greater than that. Like, it's tough to describe, but when I look at the pages in these sketchbooks, I can't help but really have all of these images and memories just pop up into me with such power of everything that went into getting that sketch, and you know, how it came about. And there's so many stories involved, and a lot of the times Miranda was with me when we got it. So I just like the idea of these heirlooms providing those memories in the future. But, and I just want to be clear, if hard times ever happens to my daughter whenever I'm gone, I hope that I don't have to sell my toys. You know, I have sold some over the years. You know, as I say, fortunes change. There was some article on me in my collection in Giant Robot magazine in the 90s where I said, I want them buried with me. And that was, you know, before my daughter was born. I want to go on the record, I don't want these buried with me. Everything goes to her. She can do with them whatever she wants. She will not have betrayed me in any way. It's up to her. And I'm perfectly healthy, by the way. I'm not like passive aggressively announcing some illness that I have. But, and if she needs to sell the sketchbooks for whatever reason and can do anything with them, I hope that's not the case, but that will not anger me at all. And it just, having this adventure with her has really been a complete joy. You know, I've slowed down a little bit. I want to get back into it some more. And I want to thank you for contributing to it. I'm really well known for my collection. And I think people assume that my collection is complete, and it really isn't. I have a giant want list, and I'm not done. And I don't like take for granted what I have. I don't feel like it's only the thrill of the hunt. I mean, I really enjoy having what I have, but there's a lot that I still want to get. And in the 90s, when I had cool Japanese toys, you know, I would, inspiring people. It's like cartoonist kayfabe, where they would break down some issue of a comic and, hey, this is cool and look at how great this is, and then you can't find it anymore.
The
you know,
kayfabe effect.
Yeah, the kayfabe effect, it's called. So that happens with toys too. You know, I would write about something and then I couldn't find it and it would be harder for me to get. So there's a fear in collecting that, hey, you're gonna get really into this stuff and time is going to pass and interest is going to wane and you're gonna have trouble selling it because its ship will have sailed. So with Jumbo Machinders, it's really difficult to overstate how popular they are now, how modern versions are. There's this company, ABY Style. They just did the Super Deluxe Grandizer. One HL Pro also did a slightly smaller Jumbo Machinder Grandizer. Super 7 has been making Jumbos. Their masterpiece, as far as I'm concerned, is the Mecha Godzilla. They designed, they made themselves. Toynami has the Shogun line. They are making Jumbo Machinder Macross toys. Shima X, this company in Japan, they're making Jumbo Machinder villains. They're doing Grengo C3 right now. They did a couple versions of Garada K7. They're not stopping. Mandarake was making Jumbo Machinders of obscure characters. Or Jumbo Machinder, I don't think they were using the name, but they did Astro Ganger. They did Poseidon from Babaru Ni. They did some Mazinger villains as well. Gelbros J3, I think it was. Mattel, you know, which had the Shogun line. They're doing Masters of the Universe Jumbo Machinders. And Bandai, which started it all, is re-releasing the Jumbo Machinder Mazinger Z this year. So, like, it's not dying at all. It's not gonna get any easier, you know, for the stuff that I still have to collect, but I'm looking forward to the challenge. And in terms of what I've achieved as an artist. I'm very, very proud of the Jumbos that I've made for myself and my own collection, but I'm more proud of making this comic of Jumbo Titan X and making my own vinyl toy of it. So that was my idea. Like, can I do both all by myself? And I have.